Draft season feels officially in our rearview mirrors as OTAs are kicking off for every team. That said, Scott and I wanted to take a look at all that rookie draft information from our very own leagues and walk through some interesting takeaways, looking at a few of our favorite players, some intriguing observations, and of course, our best IDP draft interactions. Welcome to IDP Drafts. Welcome, Scott. So excited to be back in the seat here with you. A little jealous you got to spend some time with Evan, or that Evan got to spend some time with you. But I couldn't picture a better way to jump back into the saddle with you other than talking about some of our favorite dynasty moves, which I know we don't really do a ton on here, but today we get that chance.
Yeah, I'm thrilled because I know we both have been doing a lot of dynasty rookie drafting because we have been messaging each other when we've been either on the clock or we get a trade offer or we want to brag about something we did. And I know most, like you said, of the rookie drafts, but I have one league where we insist on drafting in August our rookie drafts. You know, some people might have a June 1st draft, and so they might still be working through it. But no matter what, I think it's always fun to I love best ball, and I love that sort of instant gratification of the draft being done and it just being that 1 year. But you know, the data from State of IDP shows that Dynasty is the biggest format, and even though the IDP show and the after show do tons and tons of Dynasty, and I am loving the edge rankings right now that Adam is putting out because I have 3 of the top 10 edges according to him in one of my leagues. So that felt very good to hear. But it's nice to jump into the Dynasty waters a little bit.
I love it. I'm with you. I got one of those August rookie drafts too, and so Spicy Joe, if you're listening, this is us telling you to change that draft time. So, all right. That said, though, we got some data here and we got some ADP. But how did we gather this ADP specifically?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in sort of the tease for this week's episode, we pulled from some of our own leagues. And the nice thing about this is I'm in a few leagues that have multiple copies. So I'm in one team that is essentially a 14-teamer, but there's 6 copies of every player because there is 6 times 14 teams, so 94 teams, 96 teams. Trying to do math late at night doesn't always work out, but there's a lot of teams in that league and it's fun and it's dynamic. But the awesome thing about that for our purposes is it's essentially 6 drafts worth of data because you can see where each copy of the player went and then sort of parse that out. So between that league, another league I'm in with 24 teams and 2 copies, that math is nice and easy. And some of the other leagues that you're in, we essentially have information from 11 super flex drafts that are either completed or significantly advanced. And from that, we created some mini ADP where we could see where players were being taken relative to offensive players in the overall pool, the range that we've seen some of these players go to give a good sense of who you might be thinking of in one spot instead of the other. So to kick off our using of that data, we thought we would go through some of the players that jumped out at us for one reason or another. And I know the first guy that you have to mention here is someone we've talked about a couple of times. So what do you think of what you've seen from Mr. Jalon Walker?
I feel like for a guy who has the draft capital, the guy who has shown us college level production that we love to see, that gives us a strong indication that he will have success in some form, shape, or form at the NFL level. It just blows my mind that he's going at the end of the 3rd round still, right? And he's someone where I don't know if the ambiguity of his usage is throwing things off, right? There was talks of he could play some off ball, he could play some edge. You know, then there's people, the optimism, well, he could be Micah Parsons, right? Because Micah Parsons came in and they weren't sure where he would end up and how that all rolls. To me, when I just take the early look at the Falcons depth chart, I just see a guy who's uber talented, has a high amount of draft capital, and the Falcons need an injection of talent somewhere in that front 7. Now, Caden Ellis was a fun a realization for a lot of us last year for IDP, but they still need someone else alongside of him. So whether, it's a strong running mate that can, rush from the A gap type thing and pressure from there off ball, is it someone who can play a true edge, even though, he's got a little bit more slender of a frame? I really think he can potentially do all of it. And I have faith in that Falcons defense that showed us that they can be creative with some of their linebacker usage. And I just can't believe that people are willing to let Walker fall to essentially what equates to the end of the third round in a 12-team draft. I mean, at 36 overall in our ADP data. So I'm fully on board with taking him at that exact spot, or trying to trade up a couple spots ahead of that to snag him myself if I think someone else is going to go there. But I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to pull up the range here real quick. I mean, high of 27. So I mean, okay, so early third is really like the worst case. You'd have to invest in that. To me, that feels plenty worth it from where I sit at this point.
I think part of what might be, I don't know about scaring people off, but I know I have on more than one occasion been in a position where it's like, do I want Jalon Walker or James Pierce? They double dipped in the position in the first round if you consider Walker an edge, but again, we don't know exactly if he's going to be edge or linebacker, but we do know that he's awesome and they invested first round draft capital in him, and that edge and linebacker are the two most important positions in IDP fantasy football. So I agree with you. The upside is there regardless of what position he ends up taking. The depth chart at either spot isn't all that difficult to overcome. Apologies to everyone who still loves Troy Anderson, and Troy Anderson may end up being a thing. Maybe for another team, he may be one of those Zach Bonds who has that 50-year breakout that everyone's projecting. But between him and Diablo at the interior and then along the edge, there's not a ton of competition. So I agree with you. I think taking him in that end of the third is a great value.
All right. Well, from Jalon Walker, we go to no argument in the top pass rusher in this class, at least by all indications that I've seen. Abdul Carter. What did you see there with Abdul?
Yeah, so welcome to the 7th edition of Scott Opines about Abdul Carter on a fantasy football show this offseason. So I will spare you my glowing preview of what I think he's going to be in the long term, because everyone's saying it. The reason that he makes my list here isn't necessarily because of what I think he can become. It's where he's going. So his ADP across essentially 11 drafts, 11 superflex drafts that we've compiled here, is currently sitting at 17.27. So he's going middle of the second, late second, depending on how many teams are in your league. I still have him as my 11th best overall rookie in my superflex rankings. So he's someone who I'm really high on. When you look at the other guys that are in that set of rankings, Adam and Jason, our consensus is 14. So at 17.27, you're getting a little bit of value, but a little bit of value early in the draft is a lot of value. So I am really thrilled to be able to take Carter in the middle of the second when I have him projected as a late first, early second. And also when I look at the other guys who are being taken around him, if the decision is between Abdul Carter and Trey Harris, which has been the case in multiple leagues that I've been in, I feel like the probability of Carter being a number one in his position is significantly higher than Harris being there. And I like Harris too. I'm not trying to dump on you if you draft Trey Harris, but getting the best IDP asset in the draft, a really elite IDP asset. It's not like he's the best in a bad group. He's the best in a good group, and he's really damn good. So if I'm able to walk away with him in the middle of the second, especially, and I didn't think to ask you this, but most of the leagues that I put in there are 5-position leagues. So it's not just DL, and he has great value in DL only leagues, right. But in leagues where you have to start edges, that narrows the pool of players that are available in those leagues and makes that even more valuable from a positional value perspective. So love Abdul Carter. Love where he's going. I've snatched him in 2 drafts already. And if he falls this far in my August draft, I'll make it 3.
I love to hear it. And I mean, absolutely. I think the biggest thing you hit on, right, is he has a potential path to where he is edge one in Dynasty at some point in the near future, right? Like that's the talent level we're talking about. That's the situation in which he's playing. And obviously there is some concerns rotationally, whatever. They got a lot of talent there right now. But like the other guys you're talking around, there's like what is Trey Harris's true ceiling, right? Like, I mean, Cam Scatabo, is he really going to be some elite running back? Like, it's a great story if he becomes fantasy relevant or a strong NFL contributor, but Abdul Carter has a chance to reach that type of ceiling. And in IDP circles, I think most people know this, but just to reiterate it, what's the one position that is most stable in terms of IDP fantasy production year over year? It's our edge rushers. So now if you got a guy who's got a ceiling of, top edge rusher, elite, production, you're going to pass on that for a shot at,
A
Trey
wide
Harris, Cam
receiver too,
Scatabo,
or
Asheville too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Like, I mean, it just seems silly when you put it in that context. And I think some people just get caught up in the moment. Offense always trumps defense, right? I think you had that in the notes. I mean, that's just people's perspective when it comes into it. But sometimes you need a little extra perspective to really lock that down.
And I know you're going to touch on this a little bit later, so I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. But to the people who are fading him a little bit because he's in a rotation this year, if you're drafting for year one production, you're probably doing something wrong in your dynasty leagues. I think it's fine to draft for production late, maybe, because there are viable corners, who are going to be starting that you can get in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round. That's fine. But if you're a win now team and you absolutely need that final piece and you're using a 1st or 2nd round pick on someone who you need to be productive, just trade the 1st or 2nd for a proven veteran. I'm sure I could have flipped the spots that I took Abdul Carter for a top 10 edge, given Carter has the potential for a long-term, but I didn't do that because I'm a Penn State guy and I love Abdul Carter. But if you're a win now team, just trade out of the pick. And if you're not a win now team, then don't worry if it's going to take a year or 2 years for him to become an edge one or a DL one for your team.
All right. I love it. Awesome. Moving on. One of my favorite guys, and I've talked about him before, and I was very mad in my home league draft that drafted over this previous weekend. I didn't have an opportunity in the 5th, and I tried so hard to trade back into the 5th so I could get him, but was unsuccessful. So when the auction draft comes off, to really step my game up there. But I'm talking about Los Angeles Rams linebacker from the 5th round, Chris Paul Jr. Chris Paul, I just really loved what I saw from him in the combine. I loved what I saw on tape from him when just doing a little bit of film review for him, because he's just a name that kind of came through a lot of circles of NFL talent evaluators that I listened to in podcasting and in written form. And I was like, okay, I got to check this guy out. Right? Like everyone just keeps talking about him, and he does. He just really he explodes off the tape for me, and not in the way of he's got these crazy athletics, right? But he's got strong measurables. He's very quick. And I love that explosiveness from him. He lacks a little bit of the agility, right, to maybe get around and get off of some of the blocks. So I really anticipate him to be more like an Ivan Pace, Diane Henley, right? Like he's going to get to the spot before the offensive player does, and that's how he's going to make his play. Less of he's going to outmaneuver per se, or be able to shake off, these other linemen on the offensive side that have nearly 100+ pounds on him. But I love what I see, right? So that's just me gushing there. I'm done with that. When you look at what I see as his potential talent, and you look at Omar Spates and Troy Reeder as the things or the obstacles he needs to overcome to be LB1, and now I just say, okay, well, maybe he just needs to beat out one of them to become LB2. Obviously not as valuable, but I think that's something that he can easily do by early season, and then maybe by late season, he's someone that can take over and do a lot more for us. And I'm a fan of what Chris Shula did with that defense last year, and the IDP production we saw even from linebackers like Christian Roseboom. Now you put in people I think who have, I believe, significantly more talent physically out there. I'm on board to see what we can get from him, and especially when you talk about he was the 81st overall rookie. So, and your 5-round 12-team drafts, pick 60, right, is where it ends. These are guys that you're picking up for. I think it's Johnny the Greco says, right, the price of a mouse click is you're undrafted free agent after the fact. You're just putting a little bit of fab out there to pick this guy up. I got him everywhere I could, and especially in a lot of drafts too, where I traded a lot of my picks to be competitive for the year, and I came in with either very little or actual no draft capital to those drafts. I was so excited to be able to pick up guys like Chris Paul after the draft wrapped up in this offseason.
Yeah, I have a share or two of Chris Paul because of the value, and it was honestly that value and seeing what you had mentioned as we were getting ready for this episode that led me to the guy that I want to talk about, and that's Nick Martin. So Nick Martin, also a linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. It really, you made me think about, do I want Martin at his ADP of 44.9 across our essentially 11 drafts, or Paul for free, or at 81st? I know that Martin has the draft capital edge over Paul, but, and again, I'm not going to just beat this drum more than I've already beaten it, because I'm sure the more I do that, the better season Nick Martin's going to have and make me look foolish. But if you look at where they were before the draft process started, Paul was head, shoulders, and then standing on a two-step ladder above where Nick Martin was athletically in terms of scout evaluations, consensus evaluations, NFL draft projections. So Martin is getting most of the bump that he got because he is in a phenomenal spot. And there is no doubting that. But at an ADP of 44.9, that's still a bit rich for me. The other thing that I found really interesting when I dug into Martin in this data that we put together was he was by far the most polarizing IDP among the top 60. So in those 12-team 5-round drafts that are pretty commonplace, he has a variance of 2.5 rounds, and that is wild to me. The earliest he went in our data was draft pick 36, so the very end of the 3rd round. He went as low as 66th and went undrafted in 1 5-rounder. So really, if you were to factor that in, his ADP would slip a little bit further. So I think that, there are things to get excited about with him. I took him in the 5th round of one league just in case I'm wrong, to have just sort of that, okay, I'm wrong, but I'm winning my league, so I can sleep easy at night. But I think there are too many people out there that are drafting him at what he could become, because I still wouldn't be shocked, and I'm not the linebacker expert, but if Jermaine Pratt gets cut, you're telling me Pratt's not an upgrade over Nick Martin? Or if Martin struggles at all in OTAs or in the initial part of the year, that Eric Kendricks, who's just sitting out there, isn't going to garner any attention. So I get that he has a clear path, but to me, he has that kind of clear path a little bit like Chris Paul. He has more of a leg up in San Francisco than Paul has in LA, but I don't think he has 4 rounds difference worth of value. So that's why I found his range of outcomes interesting, especially in light of your bringing up Chris Paul.
Yeah. It's a very interesting price tag to pay, where I agree with you. I'm not super comfortable with it. And, D Winters is, someone, again, he could be a Jag, right? In terms of fantasy production, and he could be relatively easily overcome for Nick Martin to get that chance. But I don't know. Like I said, the pre, maybe I'm stuck on my biases pre-draft with Nick Martin, but I struggle to do that. But again, I think in my home league he got taken in the middle of the 5th or something like that. That's to me, that's a worthwhile dart throw right there, right?
Yeah.
And at that point too, I mean, when is the production really going to come? Probably late season, if at all, this year for him. I think he's someone who, in my opinion, will be more in line for year 2 production if he's bound to get it. So
yeah, he's a great dart throw. So treating him like a sure thing feels a little bit weird to me. But like I said, I took him. I think he might end up proving me wrong. I hope he does for Adam's sake. I think Adam is really heavy on Nick Martin based on some of the stuff I've heard him say. So fingers crossed for him, but not for me. I'll pass most of it, especially at these values until, like you said, he gets into that fifth or sixth round. Then I'll take a dart throw because that's what you're supposed to do in the fifth and sixth round is take dart throws.
Yep, love it. Awesome. All right. Well, for me, I'm just going to move up one spot in our ADP rankings here, from 81st overall to 80th, and that leaves us with cornerback Jahdae Barron of the Denver Broncos. This is someone who, when I saw his tape and watched him, and just in preparation for draft study, holy cow, this guy's fun to watch out in the field. I mean, the guy, he can play in any aspect of the game. He truly has the skill set and the versatility to align anywhere on the field. He can play outside if you need him to play outside. He can, get in the slot. He can get up on the line with press coverage. He can, move with motion and end up in the box and try to, get into the run fit a little bit. It's not his top end talent, but he doesn't hesitate, which gives me excitement about obviously his ability to deliver for IDP production as well.
Mm-hmm.
He comes into a very, very loaded secondary, right? They have a lot of talent there already. They picked up Hufanga on the back end, but obviously the big name is Pat Surtain that they have there. That means that one of those outside corner spots is spoken for. Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan come the next two question marks then. Moss played a ton outside last year for them. McMillan locked down the slot role. I just don't know that McMillan did enough to guarantee that Barron wouldn't want to see what they have with Barron there sooner rather than later. And when you look at what McMillan was able to do in that defense, and it's the same even for Riley Moss, when you look on the outside, the tackle numbers that these guys put up in that defense, McMillan had 77 combined tackles, six pass breakups, a sack, but he also left a lot on the bone in terms of what he left with missed tackles on the field, with 12 total on the season. So if we could put that together, you're looking at a guy who could potentially have close to 90 tackles. I think Barron is someone who can be a stronger run fit for this defense if he's playing in that slot role for them. Optimistically, in a full season, I could go out on a limb and see Barron, being a 100 tackle guy, plus what he can do in pass coverage. I think that's someone I can get very excited about. And now when you talk about, again, he's getting drafted 80th overall. I mean, that's even in a 6th round draft, he's free at the end of it, right? Or whatever your fab bid's going to be. Someone, same thing, sniped me, or they were able to trade into the 5th round, and they were able to draft Barron, because Barron and Paul were my two targets to pick up in that league. It was disappointing, but I kudos to them. And I love that the person came back to me right away and he said, I see shades of Devin Witherspoon. Now that's a lofty statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to see that come to fruition as a Barron believer. But I mean, that's where people are at on him, but the value is not reflecting that in drafts. So great opportunity for, if your drafts are done and you haven't already scoured your waiver wires, maybe this is a name that's out there for you to go pick up and add in.
Absolutely. I think a couple of points that you hit on that are really important there are, one, with Pat Surtain on the other side, there's going to be a lot of targets. I mean, teams like to target rookie corners. I know we think of Sauce Gardner as a shutdown corner who has no fantasy value now, but look at his rookie year, where he was still a very good corner, but he had a lot of tackles because he was still being targeted. Now imagine he had someone who was a true lockdown on the other side. So the upside is there for Barron, but also it's that value. 80 is absolutely wild to me. So I'm looking at the range that he's been drafted at, and 64th is the highest he's been drafted in our little mini data set. 64th is the highest. He is overall, the 80th player being taken. But when you look at, again, in the IDP show draft kit, there's rookie ranks for 1 QB, Superflex, and IDP only. I'm looking at the Superflex ranks for Barron. I have him at 50. Adam has him at 46. Jason has him at 56 overall. So where he's going in these drafts is worse than the worst projection from any of the three of us who are looking at all of this. And I can tell you, I don't rank a corner even in the 50s lightly. Whenever I'm modeling this out, to give you a peek behind the curtain, I have what I call a cornerback penalty because I know how much the market hates drafting corners. So I take 10% off of your player valuation if you happen to be a corner. And that's that's after I already do an IDP penalty to make offense versus IDP a little bit more relevant. So I'm knocking this guy down every chance I get, and I can only move him down to 50. To see him going this late is just printing money. So I'm here for it. I don't know that I have him anywhere yet because value in other places just kept falling in my drafts and I kept scooping it up. But I'm with you. Barron at that ADP is just wild. But I wanted to throw a curveball for our last name before we get into some of our general observations. And, you know, if Josh is listening, he may want to cover his ears because it's not an IDP. It is Elic Ayomanor, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. And the reason I want to bring up a wide receiver is to highlight the value of IDP. So Ayomanor, his ADP currently is 37.8. So he is, around the 38th most drafted player. I think he's actually sitting just a spot behind Jalon Walker, who we talked about before, if you do a ranking of the ADP. So when you look at the other players that are around him, it's just wild to see because you still have the DT1 in the class in Mason Graham, whose draft range is 32 to 46 in our data. And again, Ayomanor, 37.8. Emanwari and Malachi Starks have a combined ADP range, combined range of being drafted between 32nd and 51. So they're almost always there the same time Ayomanor is there, and people are taking him over them. Demetrius Knight in multiple leagues was sitting out there, and teams went Ayomanor. And I understand wide receivers have value. And I like Ayomanor. I'm higher on him than the other guys. If you look at those rankings, I have him 45th versus 52 and 59 from the other guys. So I like him, but I don't like him at 37.8 whenever I have guys like Graham and Emanwari and Starks and Knight who are in my top 30 or top 40 in worst case. This just feels like getting a little too cute for me. Some of this might be small sample size because he's only been drafted in a handful of the leagues that we pulled from. I mentioned one of the biggest drafts is still underway, that 6 copy promotion relegation league that I'm in. But still, where he's sitting currently in this sample size just makes no sense and is a great reason for you to want to look at IDP, because some of the top IDP in the class are still sitting there and people are clicking Ayomanor's name over theirs. That's not a recipe for success for me. Just take the IDP.
Right. I feel like this is the Family Guy, right? Well, hey, I got Jalon Walker here. He's like a boat, man. Like he's going to give me fantasy points this year. Like I feel very confident about that. But Ayomanor could be anything. He could be a boat.
He could even be a boat. Yeah.
So
just take your number 2.
I love it. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on this one. And I was curious when I saw the name in the show sheet. I was like, where are we going with this, man? I'm curious, but I absolutely love it. I really have nothing to add to it because I think you nailed this perfectly. So
yeah, did I fake you out a little bit in thinking I had inside intel that he's like going to be Travis Hunter and playing corner for Tennessee as well? I ran down to Nashville and harassed the coaches. Like, oh wait, does Scott have a scoop? No, I don't have a scoop. I just have an overwhelming love for scooping up IDP value and not reaching for offensive talent.
I was like, oh, is this the real secret of Scott Fishbowl, right? Like they're putting in IDP stats for not just Travis Hunter, but too good. All right. Well, hey, if we want to cleanse our palate a little bit from this offensive talk, A really quick way you can do that is jumping into a D-Up draft. So let's listen to a quick message from our friends over here at Fast Draft about the D-Up competitions.
The Super Bowl is the biggest event in sports, but Jalon Carter makes big plays and very few fantasy gamers care. That's going to change with the D-Up contest on Fast Draft. You draft 6 defenders. The top 4 enter your lineup every week. You can draft up to 30 teams. There's a $10,000 prize pool. And if you love Aiden Hutchinson, you can get big exposure to that guy. And every time he's making plays for the Lions, you're making money. It's such an easy game to play, and it's so fun to sweat both sides of the ball on Sundays. Of all the Fast Draft contests, it's the D-Up game that I think is going to really change how people play fantasy. Now use your host promo code to get a $50 deposit match when you deposit on Fast Draft. So, let's start drafting faster.
All right, and welcome back. Now that we've talked about some of our favorite players, let's take a step up in our perspective here and make some general observations about what we saw from this data set when we looked at these drafts. Scott, I know you want to kick us off with your first one. So what did you see?
So I'm not quite addicted to trading, but trading is something that I enjoy, and there is never a better time to trade than during rookie season. And this is a phenomenal year to be trading because there is so much great IDP value in particular that's falling, but also some pretty good offensive value where you can move back, get a player of a similar risk profile, and pick up an IDP asset. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about this is, we have a great trade calculator tool over at the idpshow.com. But fortunately for you as a listener, and unfortunately for your league mates, a lot of folks still just look at places like Keep Trade Cut, which pays no attention whatsoever to the value of picks relative to your league size, relative to the fact that you use IDP even. So if you go on a site like Keep Trade Cut and build out a trade, there you can trade pick in a 12-team super flex league, pick 208 for pick 305 and 312. And that is fair value according to Keep Trade Cut. In the leagues that we've been looking at, the 20th best overall player is also number 20 in our rankings. So Jack Beck, wide receiver for the Vegas Raiders, fair value, good pick at 20, like spot on with our site rankings in terms of where we have these combined players. But if you can flip that pick, the guys that are still there at 305 on the offensive side of the ball are guys like Jalen Noel, Bayshaw Tootin, and Harold Fannin, who all have, I would say, an upside profile that at least rivals that of Jack Beck. I get he's a better asset. I have him ranked higher than the 3 of those guys. But if you trade back, you're not only getting one of those 3 guys, but with that 312 pick, the IDP assets that are there are guys like Demetrius Knight, Malachi Starks, Nick Emanwari, Jalon Walker. And so move back. This is a great year where there is a flattening of the offensive talent curve that you can exploit. Move back, pick up someone who is just a little bit below the guy that you would have taken in that early to mid second to pick up a early third and a late or mid third and a late third with this example, and just scoop up that same offensive dart throw. And as sure as you can get with some of the sure things when it comes to IDP. So this is just a phenomenal year for trading for me.
Yeah, I love it. It's spot on. And the nice thing is I know that like the example you broke down was specific to this year, but it's a general understanding that you should take into all your drafts, right? And a great way to approach that is if you can really have those tiers and buckets, right? Because I agree with you, right? When you look at, Jack Beck and it's like, okay, Noel, Tootin, and Fannin, all those guys would be in the same tier, right? So when I get to 208, those guys are all people that could have been considered in that regard alongside of him. But if you can stay within that tier with this trade down and grab an additional asset, especially one that is, I'll say for whatever reason, depreciated value in the Demetrius Knights, the Jalen Walkers, and so on. I mean, that is the smart money. Obviously, if it breaks your tier, right, then okay, well then Beck was the last guy in this tier. I see a clear drop off after this. Well, then yeah, then that's why you make that move if that's your personal belief. But this draft was perfect for that. So hopefully, if you still have some drafts left, people, you can go ahead and start to apply this directly, and just pure profit. If not, it's not a 1-year thing, right? Like, you definitely take it away. It was just, I think, to your point, it was much more obvious this year.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, looking at my first observation, and this is something I think you kind of keyed into a little bit earlier, in some of the talks, right? Is this feels like a very next year draft class to me. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of value and there's a lot to be realized overall. But I think the ceiling of what we're going to see from some of this talent in the IDP side is really, really going to come through in year 2. And I think that's just a matter of teams realizing the need for these positions still, but trying to plan ahead, for the next year, and beyond. So I think a prime example is Jihad Campbell in Philadelphia. He comes in, people are, where is he going to play, right? Well, when's Nakobe Dean going to come back? Oh, he's going to do some edge rushing. Oh, he's going to put him wherever he fits. Maybe he plays multiple roles this year, right? It's a little ambiguous for him too. That's all right. But you know what's going to happen next year? Someone's going to leave, or they're going to, they're not going to need to re-sign someone because they'll have Campbell. They'll know exactly how to deploy him. And that's when he's going to be very profitable for us from an IDP standpoint. That said, I think this is a great opportunity for us to find the guys you like, really see how things start to happen and shake out. And when, week 3, 4, 5, 6 comes along, people either start to figure out they're contending, they're not, or people get antsy and they want to move an IDP asset that's really not putting up a lot of points for, you got some, handcuff running back that they need. It is a great time to go ahead and really suck that value into your team. And really, like I said, really enjoy that from year 2, because I think we're going to see a lot of that, right? Demetrius Knight, you talked about Jermaine Pratt. Yeah, I think there's still a good chance he moves on. But right now, people look at what is tangible, what's in front of them, and that's Jermaine Pratt blocking Demetrius Knight from being a strong IDP asset for us. Heck, Michael Williams was someone going into my draft last weekend I was excited about, because I was like, he's going to fall. I bet I'm going to grab this value. What happens? Oh, Bryce Huff is coming into San Francisco all of a sudden, just like that, right? Because they're waiting for that June 1st designation to save some cash on the salary cap side. Okay, well, now, again, I'm still excited about Michael Williams' potential, but I also realize, the year 1 production gained a bit of resistance, right? Because Huff can be a strong pass rush specialist. Michael can really succeed in run defense. To me, that looks like a strong rotation setup right there. Not one where we're going to see a lot of year 1 coming out from Michael's side of things. Again, multiple outcomes for all these paths. This is just what I'm seeing. I think this is going to be a great year for us to find those guys we love, make our claims, mid-season when teams are really itching to build out their roster differently because they just need production elsewhere. And this is where we got to be making those moves, because year 2 is going to be a really fun year for this IDP class in terms of production.
And if you can't wait till year 2, trade the picks. I have, I'm in, I want to say 6 or 7 dynasty leagues, and I have probably 2 of the leagues where I don't have the time or patience or interest, or I have a good enough team where I like to trade away most, if not all, of my picks. I mentioned that mega draft that we're in right now. I feel like that draft takes all summer. It's a lot to keep track of how many copies of each player have gone. I have a pretty good team there, so I'll just trade away my picks. I kept 1 pick to get the one guy I'm trying to walk away from every draft with, who I'm not going to say by name because I've said it by name several times already. And check out the degenerate draft guide that I put together for the IDP show if you want to learn more about who my fantasy ride or die for this season is. But if you can't wait till year 2, then just don't make the pick, because you're seeing too many people who are impatient with these guys. I was really relieved to hear Adam talking about Dallas Turner as a player who he still thinks is a top 10 edge asset, because you're seeing people wanting to move on from him already in some shallower leagues. And it just, you need to have patience. And if you're not a patient person, or if you're in a must win now kind of situation, then just trade the pick, man. It's and I think that this is a good year, as I already mentioned, to trade in general. But I think one of the other places where this year can be really prudent for trading is when you see value dropping, to move back into a draft and get it. So even in that league where I said I traded all of my current picks, I'm holding on to all my futures. And whenever I check it periodically and I see that there's third round talent and we're in round 5, I'm going to try to move back in for that one particular guy, not just for the sake of acquiring draft picks. So one of the things that I've observed this year, and I'll be curious to hear if you've seen this too, is I feel like we're finally starting to get through a little bit of this antiquated mentality in our dynasty leagues that present draft picks are always worth a future year +1. So if you want to move into the second this year, it's going to cost you a first from next. Or if you want to move into the third, you got to give up a second. I understand that there are some circumstances where that absolutely should be the case. If we're talking about pick 212 in a 12-team league, or even 229, 210, then I could see, okay, you need to give up. I'm sorry, if I got that flipped. If we're thinking about early, so 301, 302, 303, giving up a second, guaranteed profit for the person who's taking the pick.
Yep.
But we see too many leagues where that mentality is just so deeply ingrained that if you have something like a pick 312 and you try to trade in for it, they'll be like, well, I want your second. And it's like, well, I understand that there's a discount on the value of future picks, but you're guaranteeing at least a 12 pick upgrade here if I win the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anyone in their right mind who would trade 212 for 312. So I'm glad to see more trades that have, like that example that I gave where it's say 312, you trade a future second, but you get 312 and a future fourth or a future third, because a lot of times 2/3 will equal a second. I'm also seeing more people realizing that if a team won the league last year, their future is probably not worth as much as a team that seems like they have absolutely no idea what the hell they're doing. Every league has at least one of those people in it. I don't care if you're a 10-team home league and you've known these people since high school. That person's picks are worth more than the person who is co-hosting a show on this stuff, or who won the league last year, or who is clearly out of their rebuild cycle and is actively acquiring veteran talent. So pay attention to the teams that you're trading with, because not all futures are worth the same. And stop overpaying for current picks and trying to justify it as, well, hey, it's just the way it is. And I'm really glad that this year I've seen a lot more of that discernment of not all futures are worth the same, and not all presents are automatically worth that future +1 in terms of the round that you have to give up.
Yeah. I will say that so many things we have a taco in our league, right? So I have to say I love that. You also hate me because in our home league draft, 305 came on the board. I had so many guys left in my tier. I actually had 306 as well. I literally in the group chat, I was like, hey, any 2027 second gets this done. And half the chat was like trying to trade with me. The other half was like, that's not fair value. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, just because I think it's an overpay doesn't mean I can't ask for it if someone's willing to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, if you're a seller, more power to you.
Right,
but if I was a buyer in your league, I wouldn't be crying about it being unfair. I would just put the phone down and go do something else until someone else overpays.
Yep. Right. And so someone did take the deal, and and then I got, like I said, 3-4 of the other GMs in the league are like, highway robbery. And I was like, I mean, I put it out there and someone wanted it. So
yeah.
So I agree with you. There is a trend away from that, though, because I think a lot of the people I play with are relatively sharp people, but also when put in a public space like that, I think people get antsy. They're like, okay, I know a price, I'm willing to pay it. I'm going to do it to get what I want. Right. But yeah, I do think people are starting to trend away from that general evaluation of things as overall, which is great in the totality for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. I know this doesn't always fit with my moniker. I do believe picking up defensive back talent, cornerback or safety, is always done in the later rounds of a draft. But this draft had a lot of DB talent in it, a lot of DB talent that I was very excited about. Obviously, you know, we had the big names at the front end of the draft, and Starks and Imanwari. They were big names before the draft capital associated with them. We saw Andrew Mukoba come up and make, you know, or get some really strong draft capital with the Eagles. You know, he's probably got, you know, maybe he's got some waiting to do, like we talked about earlier, more of a year 2 guy. But just beyond that, the talent, you know, Jonas Sanker, Latham Ransom, great spots and great opportunities, and talent overall. I'm very, very excited to where some of these guys are falling with the drafts. I talked about Jahdae Barron, even as a cornerback. I like him as a defensive back. Like if you're on a sleeper platform, I think he's a great pickup there too. But there was one that stood out for me, one that I absolutely loved, one that I was excited for coming in here, and I hope I strike a little spot in your heart due to his alma mater here. But Kevin Winston from Penn State, I absolutely love picking him up everywhere. I am saddened, right, for his year 1 prospects and his draft capital due to the injury that he suffered. I think it was game 1 or game 2 of the season this last year, but it's allowing me to pick this guy up in so many spots. Put him on a taxi squad. Wait to see. You know, Tennessee has, I think, a coach in Mike Vrabel who's definitely going to want to bring in veterans to play this year 1 because he's going to want to set a tone and set a culture, and you're going to get that best from veterans. But they're just that too. These are aged veterans that I don't think have long term. I believe Kevin Winston can come in. He can learn exactly what he needs to do from leadership in these other veterans. But then the talent that this guy, I mean, he was consensus as far as I can tell, you know, across mock draft database information. He was a consensus first overall pick before his injury last year. I I don't think that goes away just because he suffered. Was it a pectoral tear? I think, right. It was. Now I'm blanking.
Yeah, I'm not sure
But,
either.
it's nothing that, again, that's, you know, Achilles tendon type thing where it's like, okay, there's a true 2-year recovery window for something like this. So I'm loving the talent that's there. I think people should be looking to scoop up these DBs at that late value in those 5th rounds, or those, you know, mouse clicks in free agency, or waiver wires or fab after the rookie draft is completed. But the one you should be really trying to pick up a lot of, in my opinion, is Kevin Winston. Unless you're in my league, then you can just stay right away from him.
Yeah, and so Carter had the shoulder issue. Winston was ACL, but
Okay.
there's a huge but there. But he rehabbed for an entire season
Yep.
and participated in his pro day where he ran a 4.5 40. So I think he's shown that he's recovered and he's over it, where it's not like someone who got hurt in the college football playoff or
Yep.
anything like that, where we're not sure if they're going to recover. He seems like he is, well on his way to being able to be productive very early on for the Titans when they choose to call upon him.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And I wanted to, so I know our last little bit that we're going to do is just some of our favorite picks and trades and just some of our favorite things. I loved when listening to the guys talk about their draft hauls and who they were able to walk away with. And, we play a lot of fantasy football. We like to brag a little bit about some of the things that we were able to pull off and do and enjoy. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of our favorite things that we did. And to kick us off, I'm going to talk about a non-rookie because I have a couple of leagues that allow you to draft veterans either as part of the rookie draft or as part of a supplemental. And I was able to snatch up Theo Jackson in both of those. So Theo Jackson, safety for the Minnesota Vikings. If you listen to the flagship show, you've heard Adam talk about him substantially. I'll let you listen to all of his glowing praise, but the bottom line is there is not much of a path to competition for him. And Minnesota in my home league scoring settings fielded 3 200-point safeties last year. And Theo Jackson is a safety in that system and is very clearly looking like that guy who's in the third spot in the short term. And he's only 26. And as much as Harrison Smith has had a prolific career, Harrison Smith is much older than that. So not only is he a nice short-term guy, but he could be a good long-term guy. And I got him at pick 1002 in one of my leagues. And I got him in pick 116 of the supplemental draft of a 16-team leaguer that I'm in, where you can only draft veterans starting in the supplemental draft. Now, to put those in perspective of some of the other people that were being taken, and I know you're a big DB guy. So there's Billy Bowman, who I like a lot. I think Billy Bowman has great talent. He was in my queue, but he is kind of a safety, kind of a nickel corner. So who knows versus what Jackson is likely going to be able to produce in Minnesota. Craig Woodson. I'll be honest, I had to Google Craig Woodson. I've done a lot of reading up on rookies. He is someone who was not on my radar. Apparently, he is a safety for the New England Patriots, who also seems like he might be a nickel corner and the backup to Marcus Jones, who I think is a phenomenal nickel corner and a great IDP asset in general. The veterans that were available at these points were Juan Thornhill, who is solidly behind Minkah Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh now because Juan Thornhill has bounced around a little bit, and Ashton Davis, who I liked a lot as a rookie because he had return upside in New York. I think he is now also on his fourth or fifth different team. He is penciled in as the starter according to our lads in Miami. I didn't know he was in Miami at the moment, but still, Theo Jackson just seems like he has more short-term and mid-term value, and so I was really, really thrilled to be able to scoop him up in a couple of places.
Oh, I love the call out, right? I think last year already they talked about Theo Jackson was a big get for them and a big focus for them because of that hybrid role that we see, Metellus play a lot right now. That they had to have a backup for what Metellus does, because if he goes down, they didn't feel like they had that on the roster, and Theo Jackson gave them that confidence, right? And now the real question is Metellus is in a contract year, and I don't follow the Vikings beat that closely, but I also haven't heard any drumbeat at all in just general about Metellus getting contract extension or anything like that. So if Metellus moves on, I think the clear replacement for that type of valuable role that we see in IDP would be the aforementioned Theo Jackson. I think this is a great pickup and a great stash because he has massive upside if he gets that role solely for himself. But worst case, they love three safeties there, and it's Flores again. I don't see Flores leaving for any reason. He feels like the next Steve Spagnuolo to me, right? He's just going to be this amazing defensive coordinator for years to come.
If he gets the Cam Bynum role, because Cam Bynum is gone now. Yeah. If he gets that Cam Bynum role, that was a 200 fantasy point role last year. So, I would rather he be in the Metellus sort of spot, but okay, I'll settle for 20 or 30 fantasy points less for basically free in most of your leagues that have this. Or if you're also a league that does that one waiver wire run after the rookie draft, he is someone else who is a great person who's out there widely available in all the formats. I know Adam has sung his praises, and I was happy to get him as part of some of my rookie drafts or rookie supplemental drafts.
Oh, I love it. I'm on board with it, and sign me up for all the Theo Jacksons. And I'm sure there's some personal bond there too with the namesake. So
yeah, I've got Theo Jackson, Theo Johnson. If it's anyone named Theo, I contractually have to take him because my son Theodore goes by Theo, and you can't beat that. And he actually got an invite into the Scott Fish Bowl, so he's going to be live drafting with me. And I had to tell him, buddy. Nice. Theo Johnson is not worth. He's sharp. He plays Madden. He asked me if there were IDP in the draft, so he is already thinking a few steps ahead. But I did have to tell him, I know you want all the Bengals, and we're drafting at a live draft in Cincinnati, so they're not all going to be there. And I know you want Theo Johnson, but just take him as your last pick, maybe, because I don't think anyone else is going to take him.
I love it. Well, speaking of last picks, the next one here was someone I'm very excited about in a lot of my drafts. Had quite a wide range. One of them being pick 60 in a 5-round draft, so he was the Mr. Irrelevant for that one. We're talking about Mike Green, or as our inside joke goes, right? I accidentally typed him in as Nike Green, so just draft him, right? Yeah, Mike Green, edge for the Baltimore Ravens. I Side note, I don't know how the Ravens do this. They just fall into these talented players in the second round and third rounds. And I mean,
I
good.
absolutely hate it as a Bengals fan.
I was just gonna say, right, enjoy that in the AFC North for the next 5 years, right? But no, Mike Green was again someone I don't have to espouse the talent level that we all saw. Obviously there was some potential, with off-field issues affecting draft capital here. At the point he's getting drafted, we're looking at, what was it, the 52nd overall player in these drafts. So you're talking this guy's into the 5th round, and in most of these cases on average, highest of early to mid third. I'm gonna bet on talent all day there. I mean, that's an opportunity where I'd rather take him over one of these guys who might be a third down PPR style running back that, if someone gets hurt, well, no, I can tell you that Mike Green has the talent that as long as he keeps his nose clean, and he's in a team that has such strong culture established for decades, that I think that it can very likely be the case he'll keep his nose clean. They clearly had, a rotation set there with Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy leading the charge for the Ravens, but they wanted to bring others in. They got other edge rushers like Tavius Robinson nearing almost 500 snaps. David Ojabo was like near 300. And I know Ojabo, it was sad what happened to him with his Achilles and everything. He was primed to really maybe make some noise here for us in fantasy, but I don't know. I'd rather take my chances with Mike Green than Tavius Robinson out there, and Kyle Van Noy. Keep producing, brother. That's awesome. You're doing it this late in your career, but I can't see it happening for much longer. So, Mike Green, wheels up. And if you're talking again, early third, mid third, sure, okay, I can get some arguments there, but into the 4th and 5th round, this just feels like stealing at this point.
And Ojabo is someone who had a lot of talent, but just a quick aside on him. A player is cursed when their first ever NFL rookie card is them sitting on a bench in a walking boot watching the rest of the team practice. And that was, I mentioned my son before. We collect football cards now. We started up a couple of years ago, and Score did him so dirty. He looked like he was engaged, but he was just like, at least just crop it from here up or something to make it look like. None of the other brands did that, but his Score rookie card, you can Google it, is just him sitting on the sideline in a walking boot. So I thought he had all the talent in the world coming out of Michigan years ago, but Mike Green also has all the talent in the world and none of the significant bodily injuries that should prevent him from breaking into that rotation sooner rather than later. Because I know they like Owe, they picked up his 5th-year option, but he's also not someone who's probably going to command that massive contract and when he does hit free agency. So I think there's definitely a path. I've scooped up Green in one of my leagues.
I love it. All right. Well, you probably were able to scoop up some of those people because just doing a lot of wheeling and dealing, it sounds like, in your drafts.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm in a wrestling themed draft, and there my avatar is the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and he's known for wheeling, dealing, limousine riding, high flying, and I leaned into that this off season. So 2 trades that I want to make, not just because I'm really happy about them, but also to give you ideas for things that you can do if you put in some of this work. One was just a single move. So this was a league. I'm not going to mention the picks that were involved. It's essentially a Devy league where a lot of players are out of the pool before you even start drafting. But I was essentially able to draft a pick that ended up being RJ Harvey, sent that to someone. And in exchange, I got Jaden Higgins, Nick Emanwari, and James Pierce. So this to me was just a great illustration of that point that I made earlier, where this is a great year to trade back. He was thrilled that he got Harvey. I actually have Higgins ranked very, very similarly to Harvey. So I didn't see much of a drop off there. Plus, I get the safety 1 or safety 2 and one of the top 5 edges from the class. So great, great year to trade back. And then the other direction that I mentioned earlier in the show is, using those futures to buy picks for players that you think are unnecessarily sliding. So in a series of 3 moves, so this took a little bit more elbow grease to get it all done. I ended up moving a future 3 and a future 4, but then I was able to trade to get a future 4 back. So the net of it is I turned a future 3 into a future 5, Demetrius Knight, Nick Martin, Dylan Gabriel, and Kevin Winston. So love trade. And I will be honest, you're not the only jerk at the table. The reason I got that future 5 is I picked up a 7th round pick as part of that initial deal. And when I came on the clock at 7:02, someone said, "Hey, I'll give you a 5th for that." Okay, sure. Sign me up. I wasn't going to say I'll take a 6th and be a nice guy. So if you can do those moves, and I'll be honest, even more of a peek behind the curtain, what I did here was when there was I wanted to get a 5th, an early 5th, and I knew a 4th would do it, but I knew that 4th would just be a straight up pick. So I thought, you know what? I can give up my 3rd next year because that's, going up 2 rounds. And I won't just get that early 5th, but I'll be able to get, I think I got a future 4th back in that deal. So I got a 5th and a future 4th and some late picks. Then I was able to trade my future 4th for something else later. So I just snowballed it. And I snowballed it by sweetening that first offer in a way where it wasn't just that straight 1-for-1 kind of thing. It made a lot of sense for the other guy too. He was happy. He not going to feel ripped off after listening to this, because he got the capital that he needed in terms of that really valuable 3rd round pick in the future. But I was able to get 4 or 5 assets back because I saw how much value there was going to be late. And then I just sort of moved those to keep marching back. So it's always a great year to move back in when you see guys fall, but also think about it in some less conventional ways than just sort of those, hey, I want 504. I can give you my 4th, but if you see that 3rd, it's going to jump out a lot more, even if I'm asking for a little bit more back.
I love it. I just imagine us running a Madden team together and just destroying other people in the league and or the computer and abusing them in all the ways so we can just profit from this. But I love it. And you have my heart when you say you have Jaden Higgins as high as you do. As a Texans fan, I appreciate that.
Very, very happy to get him. And that being said, I mentioned these trades. That was probably most of the trading that I did all off season. Honestly, there may be like 3 that I didn't mention on the show across all of my leagues. Some people update their trade bait daily on MFL, and you can tell they're just like getting the shakes if they haven't made a trade in the past 24 hours. So I don't advocate that, because like that guy, every league has that guy too. And that guy in my leagues is super successful and a super fair trader, but I just can't imagine the time and effort, because I'm a big trade planner. And so when something doesn't come through, I'm like, man, I just wasted a half hour and I didn't even end up clicking send because I didn't like the deal at the end of the day. So please trade responsibly is I think what I need to end this segment with, for your own well-being.
Oh, good words and wise words to live by. Again, unless you're in a league with me, I would love to just accept wild trades as they come through here all the time. So, but besides that, what do we got coming up next year, Scott? We got some things cooking in the kitchen here.
Well, the first thing I want to mention, because you said, if I was in a league with you, is that you all should come and draft with us. I don't think either one of us have any holes in our dynasty leagues right now. If we did, we'd be telling you about those too. But what we do is D-ups all the time. So I think I have 10 entries left for the D-up contest, which is now over half full. Jake and I have been in far too many D-up drafts to count, where we now probably log in and hope we don't see each other's usernames whenever we get into a draft. But you can draft with us there, and you can draft with us in other ways. We just launched another combined best ball league. As of this recording, we have, I think, 3 spots left in that league. So we'll make sure to put a link out with the show in case you want to play. It's just $5. It's combined offense and IDP, no trading. So don't worry about me pestering you with lots of fair trades or Jake pestering you to try to, get your firstborn for something. But it's just fun best ball combined. So it's the offense and IDP like most of the dynasty leagues are. So if you're wanting to do more drafting and you want that instant gratification, obviously check out D Up. We're big fans of D Up here. But if you want to do some combined offense and IDP, come draft with us. And then I'm really excited about our next episode because it's going to be a really fun one. And it's one of those things that is really relevant, not just for best ball, but as we enter redraft season. As we think about how we build those rosters, there's always a lot of tension and strong opinions. Everyone says fade DB, and I get that. But there are a lot of strong takes regarding where you should go early in terms of going DL or going LB. And so we'll be talking about those strategies and what they look like in practice when you execute them, what we think about how our teams look when we go one way versus the other, and try to once and for all solve or at least build bridges between the DL and LB early in drafts chasm. So be sure to check that out when we come back in a couple of weeks. And until then, check out all of the stuff over at the idpshow.com. Tons of phenomenal resources, new stuff all the time. I saw Josh just suddenly dropped an article that was D Up this or that. Was a lot of fun to read. I had no idea it was coming out, and I enjoyed that. I know Mike has been doing some D Up things as well in terms of what he's noticing on a month-to-month basis. Tons of Dynasty content as well. This was our one and only foray into Dynasty for the offseason. We'll be back with all the best ball and redraft content starting next week, but tons of Dynasty information. The IDP Draft Kit is a great resource. I could go on and on and on, but just check it out for yourself. The idpshow.com, $5 a month for a subscription, and lots of great resources there. But until next time, Jake, this was fun. I'm glad to have you back. I can't accidentally call anyone else by your name whenever you're here, so that's great. It's always fun chopping it up with you and talking fantasy and getting to talk a little bit of Dynasty.
It was fun. Thank you, Josh, for giving us our chance to chop it up on this topic. Look forward to going through DL-LB with you here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a good one, as always, and I'm sure we'll find both the right and wrong answers as we talk through it all. So, no, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you guys in the draft room.